Liberia. We are once again glad to have you.
Thank you very much, Dennis, and hi, good morning to from my end. Good morning to all our listeners, and I'm really, really glad to be here. Thank you.
We want to welcome all our viewers from across the globe. The history of Liberia, it is our story, and who else can tell it better than ourselves? And that's why we are here every Saturday at 7 to discuss history. You know, they say the thing you don't know is always older than you. That's a Liberian saying. So we have our presenter here, a student of history and also FOL public policy analyst, called Family. Call, welcome to the show.
It's always my pleasure to be here.
Again, whether you're going to watch today or you're going to watch later, we want to say welcome or support the Liberian History Channel. This is something that I call it an experiment because this has never been done to have a consistent show on Liberian history. So we are very, very much fortunate to be part of history. So when history books are written in the 19 for the 2000s or the 20 for two how do I call it, for the decade of the 2020s, the Liberian History Channel would definitely be a part. Again, Mohammed is joining us from Australia. Mohammed is gradually easing his way into being a regular co-host here on the Liberian History Channel. And Mohammed, how was it last week? You were here.
Last week was good. There were interesting things said by Professor Kau, and the followers and the viewers will see that a lot of people got a lot of things out of it. And today, I just want to add one more point. Last week was a little bit of introduction covering everything, but today we're going to go systematically to see how we delve into some story or not. Well, yesterday was a general overview. Last week, thank you.
Thank you very much. This week we are going to dig deeper into the life of Benjamin Jacob Anderson, the Liberian explorer, and this is part 2. Let me now switch it over to Carl, who is going to take us on this drive. Carl, let's begin by just a brief summary of where we came from last week in the life of Benjamin Jacob Anderson, my friend and my brother and fellow Liberian scholar.
Yes. So, I've always said this is one of my favorite African people in history. He was a trailblazer, an explorer, a map maker, a surveyor, a soldier, a very courageous human being. We owe to him so much for recording information that would have not been recorded had he not done it. This is incredibly important. You know how when you ask to do something and they say to you, if not you, then who? This is that situation. If he had not done this, it would not have been done. If he had not gone into the interior of Liberia and recorded information from the perspective of an African person so meticulously, an African person who was strange or a stranger, I should say, to the area that he was exploring. So his interpretations of what he saw, he was very meticulous and methodical about how he recorded it. This is such a valuable document, a valuable journal in terms of Liberian early history, especially of those of us who have roots in the area before 1822. So again, thank you for giving us the opportunity to go deeper. I intended actually to leave the subject matter and go to a different topic, but received a number of phone calls from people that said, no, you can't just leave it at that. We're not going to, the book was shared. I think I still encourage people to read it for yourselves. But people want to have a discussion about it. So we're going to continue. But I still do encourage everyone to read it for yourself, If you don't want the PDF copy and you're in the US or Australia or Canada, UK, you can also order it on Amazon for I think less than $10. It's a reprint. But if you're more accustomed to reading an actual book, that's what you should do. But you can also get a free PDF because it's there's no copyright in most developed countries.
Thank you. And Mohammed, before we begin, we are talking about Benjamin J.K. Anderson and the journey to Musadu. Musadu is a place that anytime you speak to some Liberians, especially of the Mandingo ethnic group, they talk about Musadu, and they talk about, the first time I really heard that, I was talking to my friend Fofi Conan. That was, we were on our way to Sokoto in Nigeria. We were on the car, we were talking about, this whole idea, of these people and how, so when he was telling me, he was studying history, I believe, at the university, so he was kind of lecturing me about it, talking about Musadu and how Benjamin J.K. Anderson explored the area, but the Liberian government was slow to move in, and that's why we have Musadu all the way on that side today and not part of Liberia. That's what I learned at an early age. That's what I heard. From your recollection, what have you heard outside books about Musadu?
I love the question. You say what we heard outside book, because most of the one we have, they are all narrative outside of the book. Musadu is a great place. It's a seat of the Grand Konya. The Grand Konya is they have two versions of it. The one version is that every Mandingo that is from the Musadu all the way down to Morovia, that is not of Mandinka, they all fall under the Grand Konya, the Konya region of the sort of Mandingos who fall into that. And Musadu is considered to be the headquarters of that. They have categories, different divisions, 7 or 8 different divisions of that, including even those into Kwaduboni. They all come from that Konya area, but now their name is attached to them based on where they are in Lofa County, down to Bubulu and Suemaka district, all the Mandingos that are there. So Musadu is a great place to everybody that involved in that Grand Konya understanding. Even if you live in Philadelphia, was it last 2 weeks ago or in the next week to come, the Musadu Association having their get-together. So it'll be a great thing. I'll find out about the information and send it to you, Dennis. If you are around that area, it'll be very good thing to interact with them. There are permanent members of the Liberian community who are identifying with that, and permanent members of the Sierra Leonean and Guinean community, Ivorian community, who are also identifying with that Musadu heritage. These are things I know outside of the book, from what we hear from people, what we learn from people. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. One time I went to class and my professor told me, say, what have you learned? We said it, and he said, everything that you have heard, throw it out the window. I'm here to teach you. So, so in case tonight we say we're going to go with our friend Benjamin J.K. Anderson on his trip to Musadu. Carl has prepared a beautiful presentation here that we're going to be using tonight for our discussion. Carl, it's all yours.
Thank you. And once I get past the presentation towards the end, I'm going to present information that contradicts this oral tradition. But it's important that we do so because we need to understand what happened to Musadu and when it happened. So that's one of the reasons that this whole situation with Benjamin Anderson is so incredibly important. And maybe once we finish this, that will be the topic for the next show. We'll talk about Samori Toure and his empire, much more significant to the history and origins of our current population than the city of Musadu. I think Musadu just becomes a word or a name of a place in everyone's minds because that's what they were told. But that should not be more significant than the kingdom that was created by Samori Toure just after Musadu fell. And that kingdom is actually the collapse of that when the French conquered that is really the origin the latest migration. There were many, but this was the origin of the latest. So we'll discuss that a little bit further. But we need to talk about some more and more in Liberian history. It's not Guinean history. It is Liberian, Ivorian, Guinean, Sierra Leonean history. That's how powerful he was. And his history spans all the Mono River Union countries. I mean, his legacy, I should say, spans. So let's start with the first slide. We'll get into that. Let's start with the first slide.
Before you go into the first slide,
yes,
it's important we reinforce what you just said, that you lay out the fact that you're going to be saying things that may be completely contradictory to the oral narrative we have, the oral accounts that we have. Despite that, people shouldn't hold back. You have any oral historical account or any idea, please put it on there. Send them your questions. In time to call, you're going to get access to the phone to give your questions. So at least you can shed light on some of the answers. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very good that you said that. Because, so let's start with Benjamin, and we're going to go through this meticulously. We'll start the first slide. Basically, this is a photograph, an actual photograph. I said this the last time. It was kind of this blurred image from Holso's book, but I do have the actual digital photo, and this is it. Benjamin Joseph Knight Anderson, and we're going over his book that was written based on his journal by, hang on one second. Okay, so a book that was written of his journal by another great Liberian in our history. And we're going to also talk about different contributors, President Daniel Warner and others who participated in the expedition. So let's continue. Sorry, I got distracted. I was trying to respond to someone who was asking how to watch, so I apologize. Let me go ahead and turn this off.
Right.
So I'm not distracted. Okay, so that is the first slide. Again, this is a photo of Benjamin Anderson. Do y'all have anything to say about that? I think this is incredible, Dennis. Your platform is the first to show the actual digital photograph on the internet.
Yeah, I haven't seen his photograph from last week. This is incredible that I see my comrade Benjamin J.K. Anderson.
Yeah, I mean, this is great. So this is the map. And what I have on the right is a list of towns, 17 places. He visited more than 17 towns, but these are 17 key towns that he visited and was able to document what he saw when he went there to these different places. I want you to understand something very, very important as well. Many of these towns still exist and many of them do not. So the names of towns in our tradition in the northern central territory of Liberia, coming all the way down to Cape Mount. So this is modern day Western Nimba, Lofa, most of Bone, going into Bopru and Cape Mount. This is how we name places, either by events, by landmarks, but more often than not, by the ruler. So this is King Besa's town. King Besa dies, somebody else comes, then that becomes the name of the place. So, for example, Suakoko in Bone County, the last person who ruled the area was called Queen Suakoko. She becomes the person that holds the name. So when the government of Liberia starts to actually map and document these places and annex these places, not just having it in the territory, but having it actually annexed, that's when the names stick and no longer change. That's very important to note, because you're going to realize when you go through these maps that either some of these places no longer exist or the names have changed. So Benjamin Anderson's journey is not the annexation of these places, meaning this is not conquer and control. This is an expedition into unknown territory. So these places exist as they are without any influence. Or they're still sovereign, they're still self-governing. The influence comes from free will trade and exchange. Is that clear to everyone?
Let's do it again. So we have these towns. These are the places or the journey. That's how it went. In essence, that's what you're saying.
Yes. And so the map on the left, if you see all the squiggly lines, that is what we're going to be highlighting in the following slides. We're going to zoom in and look at each place. But essentially, those lines going up north, up the St. Paul River, and they end at Musadu. So they begin in Monrovia, they kind of double back to Cape Mountain, and then they go back up to Monrovia. So modern day Cape Mountain, So this whole area is where the subject of his expedition. Normally it would only take a matter of a month or so to reach this area. So 25 to 30 days to get to take an uninterrupted, undisturbed journey to Musadu from Monrovia should only really take 25 to 30 days. So when these people were coming from Musadu to Monrovia with goods to trade, it would take them a whole month, roughly, to arrive in Monrovia with country cloth, rice, ivory, gold, you name it. So they would be coming through this pathway. Now, what they did was they put up a wall of obstruction for the Liberian government. So it was only the traders who were coming. So the trade was basically controlled by people Anderson describes as Madingo. They were not allowing the Liberian government to penetrate these areas beyond, really beyond Basawa and really in Bopuru. I mean, there were a couple of expeditions to Bopuru before by missionaries, but very controlled situations. So you have no real penetration beyond that point. No real, influence, and nobody knows what's there. All they know is what they're told by the people who are bringing the goods to the coast. So that's important to mention. Do we have any questions on that?
That's very important. That this was a new route. Traders were already taking it. So Benjamin J.K. Anderson did not create this. He did not, have to get a GPS. This was what everybody was using.
Somewhat. So he tried to go the route that everyone goes, but you'll see as we progress that because they didn't want him to see a lot of things that he saw. And they didn't want the Liberian government to be aware of a lot of things that Benjamin made the Liberian government aware of. So even his guide tried to inhibit the journey and control how he passed and where he passed. So instead of taking 25 to 30 days, it actually took him 13 months. So it took him a year and 1 month to reach Musadu. So it took him so it's something that's supposed to take 1 month, it took him 13 times as long because of the hell, excuse my language, that they put him through on his journey. We're going to get into a little bit of that. So let's move on.
Yeah, let me just ask.
Okay. All right, let's move on.
In the first place, when the woman you mentioned the route going into Cape Ma, coming down to Morden, Bopulu, etc., you got me confused completely because that does not stand with the reality. Cape Ma very far from that. You could say
we'll look at it certainly. Just 1 second. We'll look at it in the map.
Oh, you look at it later, right?
Yeah, it's in the slideshow.
Okay, thank you.
So, I mean, this is based on, so here we are. So we're going to go to the next slide.
Yeah, Carl, before we go there, you said he was prevented. They put him through hell.
Yeah.
Why was that?
Again, this is an economic situation. There's one group of traders. There's an economic collaboration between a group of traders, and they control the trade route. You control the trade route, you control the wealth, you control everything. They did not want certain things to be seen. Secondly, many of these guys had been to Monrovia, and they had used slaves, really. People will say, forced labor, indentions. It was slavery. These people were not free to go. They used slave caravans as carriers, porters, to bring the goods to Monrovia. And the Liberian government would raise alarm and say, hey, slavery is abolished within the territory. Why do you have these people in chains? Why are these people towing your goods and they are in shackles? And they would say, oh, so they then had to learn to bring people, and the porters would come, they would not be dressed, they would be almost nude. They would be exhausted. And the brutality was evident to people when they would come with all of the ivory. I mean, you're carrying very heavy, goods, and these porters would walk for 30 days through the rainforest. So Musadu was not like an empire. It was more of a city, a town that was a trading post. And a lot of these larger towns throughout our region developed because of trade. This is where people would come, exchange goods, do their market. Another one was also Zozo, modern day Zozo. He calls it Zao Zao in the book, but it's the same place. Another, place where people would go and trade. So he's going to talk about that as well. The people who controlled the trade route did not want the Liberian government to penetrate beyond, Vanswa.
Could it be the reason why people just stop at Vonzwa and there's a good distance between Vonzwa and near the Providence Island? Is it the reason why people stop at Vonzwa?
You're talking about Vanswa? Vanswa, is it the same? I'm just pronouncing it wrong?
Vonzwa are the same.
Okay.
It's the same way they pronounce it today.
Okay.
But the Vonzwa I'm talking about is the Vonzwa in present-day Brockville.
Okay, you're asking if...
Yeah. Is it a reason why Vonzwa used to be the meeting point? All the goods from in the interior will be there. And from there, there's another route from there coming down to
yes.
yes.
Yes, okay. I believe that's true. Yes.
No. Thank you.
So the reason I'm showing this map, the Liberian territory before, this is how far the little red area in the lower right corner is what was taken over from us by Ivory Coast, or French Guinea as it was called at the time. The whole of West Africa was called Guinea at one point in history, so it has nothing to really do with the modern Republic of Guinea. So even Cote d'Ivoire was considered part of French Guinea. So they took over that, but the yellow is the areas that we lost to Sierra Leone and the French, to the English and the French. So when people say, oh, Musadu was not in Liberia, yes, it was. That was in the Liberian territory. So that's what this map is demonstrating, that this territory has since been lost to our neighbors.
From that map, if you can, where can you point out to say this is where Musadu was?
So the St. Paul River, that black line, that's essentially, well, we'll go to the next. So Musadu would have been in the yellow.
Yeah.
In the yellow, I can't point because I don't have access to point to what you're displaying on the screen. But you see how Nimba was preserved for the most part. From not preserved, but was retained by the Liberian government. And then on the other side, you see where Lofa, most of Lofa was retained. That is the part that they were not able to take. What you see in yellow, with the exception of what the British took for Sierra Leone, but what you see in the northern yellow part, these are areas that, especially above Nimba and between Lofa and Nimba and above Lofa and going up into the gray, this is part of the Samori-Touré Empire. So I think the next show is what we need to do is talk about Wosu and that history. So when the French conquered Samori-Touré, they took that portion away from Liberia as well, cutting off the headwaters of all of our rivers. So the source waters of all of our rivers are falling within French territory once that happened, which was a terrible blow to the Liberian Republic. And it is still very, very dangerous to have the source waters of your rivers in a foreign country.
Yeah.
So the next slide, this is Vanswa. This is the location. Do you see where Caldwell is?
Yeah.
You've got Clay Ashland just above it. You go up, there's Carrisburg, Cruiserville, Millsburg. So this was the first place that Anderson went. Do you have?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So we can see on the map, you can see how Coward is close to Vanswa, but in reality, Coward is a little bit actually far from it. The present day Vanswa, where this Vanswa is the present day is located in into Brownsville. Yeah, where
it's located where?
Brownsville. For those who watching, who knew the brother who passed away about a year ago, what they call him, Valai Dole, where he was buried. That town, that's the town we're talking about.
Are you sure that you're not confusing this with another place?
No, there's the Vanswa in Cape Mount far away. I'm not confusing because our great grandparents come from there. We even had
this is not, well, our great grandparents were not alive in the 1860s.
No. We're not to talk about those people who established that town. Some of the people who established that town for trade, they still have claim. Their descendants still have claim on that town.
The question I have for you, Mohammed.
I'm coming. Let me explain. The Dollars, the Sheriff, the Dukuly, the Fofanas, they still have claim on that town.
But the location is different from what Anderson's showing on the map.
Still in the same place.
Oh, I thought you were saying that this location near Caldwell is not the correct place.
No, the Caldwell is far away from it. You can see the way the map is drawn. Vanswa, in actual reality, is in the Brownsville area now.
That means it's not the same place.
When you know map, how map looks like. When you look at map, somewhere may look this. If you don't know what is on the ground, you may think that this is just adjacent to Caldwell. It's not like that. A little bit far away. One is in a Vanswa, in the Brownsville area, and Caldwell is on the other side. You have to actually cross the Simple River when you come from Vatan way before you can get to Vanswa.
Thank you. And this map, we don't see the legend and see how far that is. So
there is a legend on the first.
So let's take
the first slide does have a legend that shows the distance. So
let's see.
So let's take it as such and move on. From Caldwell, we have Vanswa. It doesn't make a difference whether it is far or closer.
Okay, let's move on there.
Okay, because usually what happens is with time, as time passes, even the modern location of Musadu is not. We'll show that later, but I think part of the challenge is the amount of time that has passed and the amount of changes that have occurred. And I think that's where people are getting very, very much confused with this. This is very old history. So they're writing it Vanswa. You're pronouncing it. How do you pronounce it?
Vonzon.
Vonzon.
Yeah, Vonzon.
I don't see how Vonzon and Vanswa. They're not even putting like it's just completely different.
Now I can show you example. Then I come back and tell you why it is like that. Can you please go on the first slide? You open the towns. Please go on the first slide. You show the town, the name of the town. You know, when you have Manina, it's actually Medina. There are two of it on the road. One is closer to Vanswa, it's Medina, Suen Medina, and one is closer to Bupulu, it's called Bupulu Medina. It's Medina.
Here's what I want you to do. I want you to suspend everything that you think and follow the slides. Follow what Benjamin Anderson said. Make notes. When we get to the end, we can come back.
Thank you very much.
Because I think some of the challenge here is that things change. The very first thing I said when I began the presentation is that the names of towns were not etched in stone.
No.
Many of these things have changed. And towns even disappear.
Yes.
I mean, I remember when I was working for the Land Commission, and we would go, take go in the interior, and there would be ruins, very, very old ruins in the rainforest of towns, and you could tell that the clay had been burned. Did this happen 100, 150 years ago? Nobody knows. Or you'll be in the middle of the rainforest and you'll see things that are domesticated that should not be growing there. Things like bananas. There's been no town there for over 100 years, but you still have remnants of agriculture. So you have to realize that the way things are today is not the way things were yesterday.
Right.
And we talked about this the last episode about there is a difference between 1800 and 1900.
Definitely.
And so when we talk about people alive today who knew someone that was alive at the time of Benjamin Anderson, that really isn't possible. It just is really, really, I mean, unless you want to get into the supernatural and mystical, but if we're talking about things that we know as far as human mortality and how long people can live, we have to be realistic when we're talking about these things. And I'm not to discount anyone's belief in the supernatural, but that is not my purpose on the show. We're talking about actual human lifespans that should not span more than 100 years, even if you're very old. But people don't live to be 200 years old. If they do, if you believe they do, great. But that's not the basis of my presentation. So we'll go to the next slide.
Right, and there's a comment here on Facebook. I don't know why it's not appearing here, but Steve Olufumi Adams said the place in the Blue Veil he's referring to is different, and so there's some of the things. So that's what I don't want us to really kind of go there.
Yeah, I think Vansois, just based on, I think it's so from Vansois to okay. So hang on one second. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It is the life of Benjamin J.K. Anderson. So let's follow his journey and let's see what he documented, and
yes,
we can make sense of it, and also be able to see whatever interpretation we can give it. But for now, let's stay that course.
Yep. So basically, we're gonna go to the next slide. He's gonna walk from he goes from Vansois, and what his guide, who was spoke Madingo, spoke Vai, spoke a few different languages. He was a Madingo. His name was Kafai, and it's spelled Kaifal. So Anderson had with him on this expedition, he had Congo carriers. And remember, we talked in previous episodes about who the Congos were, the recaptured Africans that were liberated from, slave ships that had never actually left the coast of Africa for the most part. They were laborers. They were the ones who were really put to work to build the infrastructure of early Liberia. It was the Congos. They were laborers, and they used to basically, many of them became educated and integrated. But at this period, many of the Congos really stuck to their culture and did not want to be westernized, and were often employed as carriers, along with crewmen. So Anderson had with him people he described as Congos and crew. So the crew, they could have been Cloud, it could have been Grable, but these are the coastal people. They could have been Bassa. Again, at that time, they used the word crew to describe the entire language family. So he had crewmen with him, and he also had Congo carriers, and Kefa was the guide. He was the one who was going to be the interpreter because he spoke many of the languages that they would encounter along the road. It is also important to mention that Vai was a language of trade, or as they used to pronounce it and spell it in those days, Vey, V-E-Y. That was a language of trade. So if you were going to interact with people in this lower part of the Liberian territory, the correspondence language was Vai, As you go further north, the correspondence language is now Mandingo. So most people that were into trade and business spoke both languages. And this is where ethnicity gets confused in Liberia. Because just because you speak a language doesn't mean that's who you are. We are speaking English. I'm not an English woman. But trade languages can be spoken by Bandi people. They can be spoken by Gola people. They can be spoken by Pella people. If you are powerful and you control the economy, your language becomes the language of trade among many ethnic groups. Does that make sense?
So it makes sense. When I was in Territorial and went to the market there, in Territorial, I spoke Mandingo.
You would have to speak to Mandingo to talk to the Omani.
Right.
I've been to Zerikore, it's true.
So when I went there and I say Bilulu, don't think that that's English I'm speaking.
Yes.
That's 50 franc.
So anyway, he was in Baswa, and he starts to run into some issues. He starts to run into some issues. From there, he goes to old Gatamba's town. So we'll look at the next slide. Where are we? Oh, you've gone far. Oh.
You kept saying, okay, this is where we began from. Venswa or Vonzon. Yeah. It sounds Bassa to me.
What sounds Bassa?
Vanswa or Vonzon, as they call it. So this Katamba town. So
yeah, old Katamba town. So he talks about how every effort was made by the Bopuru Mandingos to prevent him from going to Bopuru. So they were trying to work with Kefo to change his route. So even old King Gatamba, he sent a messenger to King Momuru, to not allow him to penetrate Bopuru under any circumstances. So King Momuru was the king at Bopuru. And King Gatamba is still living. He's a living person at this time. Old King Gatamba at Gatamba town is telling him, hey, send his messengers. These guys were swift. They go through the rainforest very fast. When you send a message from one town to another, you'd be shocked to know how fast they can reach. So that was their own telegram or phone call or email or whatever it would be. A man go to Bopuru and tell them that these Morovia people coming and they should not allow them to enter Bopuru. So he complains of this. So he's at Gatamba's town and he realizes Gatamba is preventing him from going to Bopuru. Now, this is not the same Gatamba who was alive in 1825 when he destroyed the Dey, sold many of them into slavery, and also killed, many of the people of King Peter's clan, forcing them to join the Republic. This is a descendant of that Gatamba. Or as some people pronounce it, Giatamba or Kiatamba. Okay? So I think it means something like war person or warrior. It means something like that. Those of you who speak Bai, you can tell me what that actually means, the Kiatamba or Giatamba.
I think Kia is spear or something like that.
Yeah, it has something to do with being a warrior or a fighter.
Just stop it.
Huh?
I said, I'm telling Dennis to just stop it. Kia is not spear. Yeah.
So anyway, he leaves from Gatamba town. And if you look at the next slide.
Yeah, that's the next slide.
So Kefa is now taking him basically on a wild goose chase.
So it's like taking him off the route.
Yes.
Now they are in what? Menina?
Yes. So this is a place they're calling Menina at this time. So these places, so he's basically saying that on the 6th of March, now it's March 6th, and said he hired So the 18 Congos, the crewmen basically had deserted him at King Atambasan. So now he had to hire more people at Vanswa to carry him, because they were already realizing that, I mean, these people don't want us to enter. This is dangerous. And so a lot of his carriers ran away and went back to Monrovia. And so he had to get new people to follow him. So he ended up getting new people, but not as many, not enough to carry the load. So they went past, they started going up through, let me see here. So they start going up rapidly. They end up passing Moa, Wita, Babu, and then they reach Manina on Thursday, the 12th of March. So it took them from the 6th of March to the 12th.
Excuse me, but by this time, Keifa was still with him?
No.
This guy.
Keifa remained. Because remember, Keifa is trying to thwart his progress.
Okay.
He's going to join back up with Keifa later. So Keifa is almost like he volunteered to do this, but he's really an agent of the tradesmen. Keifa is really not doing what he set out to do. He's playing double agent. He's pretending to be a guide, but he's really there to control Anderson's movements and where Anderson goes. So they send him towards Manina. So it took him from the 6th of March to the 12th of March to reach Manina, 6 days to go on this route. Any questions on this before we go to the next one?
So Kafa is not leading him now. We don't know who is. So
he hired more people, and he was guided there. And in fact, the new guide he has was basically Keifa's agent. Keifa said, you know, they will carry you. So Keifa gave him the young men to conduct the trip, and they're the ones that sent him there.
Okay. Next slide.
So he leaves from Manina now. He leaves from Manina, and then he's sent back all the way down to Besa's town. And King Besa is going to put him through all kinds of trouble. Do you see the location of Besa's town?
I know.
Far from it. Prof, even though you said we shouldn't talk about it in the context of the present day, but for those who've been to Bupulu, who are in Bupulu now or been to Bupulu, you can see from Medina town to Bupulu town, it takes you about 35 minutes walk. Normal walk. And I can see it makes sense now when he said his effort was frustrated. It makes sense now where he been sent on the south from Medina all the way back to Bese town, which is far away from Bupulu.
Yes.
Yes, now it makes sense.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to tell you, and you were like, "No, but yeah." So you see the little dark spot there. That's Lake Piso. That's Robertsport.
Yeah.
Okay. So Besa's town is smack in the middle of Vi territory.
Yes.
The Vi are also tradesmen, so they're also part of this network. So King Besa, they go from Manina to Besa's town. So this ends up being their starting point for Musadu. After they had to change their course westward, they end up in Besa's town. All the towns and villages that they passed through were basically belonged to Days. And I'm going to quote what he says here. I know people didn't want to see a whole bunch of words on the screen, so I try to do pages, but basically he says, all the towns and villages through which we passed, except Wita, Bambu, and Manina, belong to the Days. All the towns and villages through which he passed, except Wita, Bambu, and Manina, belong to the Days. And then he proceeds to write in his journal, this tribe was once numerous and powerful, but is now scattered, is now a sprinkle in a, is scattered and sprinkled in a small, into small unimportant villages over the face of the country. When he talks about the country, he's talking about that area, right? So he's saying they were once numerous and powerful, but now they're smaller numbers and they're sprinkled in little towns, remnants throughout their territory. They have, he says, they have a relic of their old anger against Liberians. So they're still resentful against the Republic. He says slave trade, war, and their absorption, they've been absorbed into other tribes, have nearly obliterated them, and everything that distinguished them as a tribe. So not only have they been sold in great numbers into slavery, and
that's
been killed in war, they've been decimated, and the remnants of the day have now been absorbed, many of them, into other ethnic groups. But they were once very numerous. I mean, when the Americans landed on the shores, the days were all over the place. There were lots of day towns. So by 1868, this has changed. And the documented wars of Gatamba and others selling these people into slavery is well documented.
Wow. It's interesting now. I was doing a show on Liberian ethnic group. I couldn't find anyone from the Day ethnic group to talk about something.
A lot of the descendants are Gola today, Madingo today, Bai today. They've been swallowed up, but majority of them were literally sold into slavery or killed. So I always talk about this thing of genocide and wiping out ethnic groups is not new. It didn't start in 1985. So this is something that has unfortunately been a thing among our people. Any questions on that before we move on?
Let's move on. We're going to bring in questions later.
Yeah.
All right. So what are we? Which slide are we on? Okay. So this is Basis Town. This is a different map. This is not Anderson's map. I wanted to look at other maps from the time period to compare them to Anderson's map. So this map is from around 1890. So you've got in the corner, you've got the Benta Baptist Mission, just there in near Lake Piso. Are you able to see that on the slide? It might be small. Yeah. And then up near Basis Town, you have the Methodist Episcopal Mission, which came later. So these are places that were opened up thanks to Anderson. And you see across there, it says Bay Country. Yeah. They used to spell, and in fact, I think I've said this on the show before, even if you listen to people speaking Bai, they refer to themselves as Bay. So that's probably a more accurate spelling. So Bay Country, you've got the Methodist Episcopal Mission, if everybody knows where that is. So Basis Town, which no longer exists, this is a different map drawn by missionaries, which is consistent with what Anderson saw about 25 years earlier, before this map was drawn. So Basis Town is no longer there. Any questions on that?
No, it makes sense. So, just to make a quick summary, in order to help those who just coming on, you started a story, talk about how Benjamin's effort to travel to Musadu was being thwarted by those who were controlling the trade in that area.
Right.
Even when he decided to go, those people he hired, they were infiltrated and influenced. They all left him. They came back to Monrovia.
Yes. Yeah, they weren't infiltrated. They were afraid.
They were afraid.
So they were afraid when you
Probably
start.
they were threatened.
So you have to remember, this is
Yeah.
unknown territory, even for the Congos and the crewmen. So you got to crew people. This is not their area. This is not their country. This is not their country. And the Congos are completely foreign, right? They've been transplanted there from, you know, another part of West Africa. So they are comfortable in Montserrado in their settlements.
Okay.
These are foreign territories for both the crew people who he took with him and the Congo carriers.
Yes.
He did not get Vi and Madingo, and I don't know why he didn't take Pele or Kwesi, as they called them at the time, people, because they also spoke the language, but his carriers, those are the people that used to want to be the carriers. So they got there, they were afraid. They said, oh, these people talking about there's wars there and it's dangerous, we're gonna be killed. So they got scared and they went back.
And then he finally got his own. He hired some people by himself.
Kefa told him, take these people will carry you.
Okay, and then they set on going, but they got to Medina. From Medina, they took him somewhere different, far from.
Medina, as he spelled it. So they took him to Medina, and then they brought him back. They would not allow him to go any further.
Yeah.
So he was. Remember, we talked about King Gatamba sending word to King Momoru to block them from proceeding to Bopuru. So now they're going back, and they go to basically to Cape Mount, to Basa's town.
Yes. Okay. Now there where we are now. Let's see. How did he get from Basa's town to Bopuru?
So which slide is Dennis on?
Yeah.
Oh, he pronounced it Boporo.
Yeah, Boporo.
So basically, when he got to Basa's town, you know that King Basa held him hostage for quite some time, you know, wasting his time trying to extort resources from him. It was a horrible experience that he had at King Basa's town. So basically, that was, I mean, do you want us to go into a little bit about what King Basa did?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to know. What did he do?
So they had to change their course westward to Basa's town because when they got there March 12th, there was a large mountain to the northeast. And behind that mountain is supposed to have been Bopuru. So they could see the mountain that they had to scale in order to reach Bopuru. But they were not allowed to pass. So they had to now go back toward Basa's town. And they were told that the mountain was insurpassable, that they couldn't pass that way, which was not true. Because there was a footpath through the hills that would have taken you. But they basically misinformed him because they didn't want him to go to Bopuru. They did not want him to see King Momoru. They did not want him to see the slavery. They did not want him to see what was going on. So, any questions on that?
No, this is clear. You can see clearly, even on this map, from physically looking at Medina from there to Bopuru, you see how short it is compared to coming back to Basa's town.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So if you look at the map, all of those mountains there are basically, that's mountain area that he drew, that he was able to see from Medina, and they were telling him Bopuru was just on the other side of those hills. So the other thing is, this is not really that close. So the Medina that you're talking about that's closer to Bopuru is not in the same location as this Medina, because that modern place is actually very, very close to Bopuru. It's actually on the other side of the hills. It's in Bopuru or Bopulu, right? And Medina.
Yes. The reason why I said that, you know, the town before Medina, now you say Bamboo, the currently is called Bambuta, is there. The same way it is on this map, represented on the map. I don't know the grade of the degree, the length of it, but when you work it physically, it's actually demonstrating how is it exact from that Bambuta to Medina. And from that Bambuta, the next place you go is Medina, that is close to Bukulu. So if the second town is there, why is not the current Medina?
So how long do you think it takes to walk from Medina to Bukulu?
Oh, well, it's about 25 to 35 minutes. But you have to climb, you got to go through the hill. And I'm talking about just recently, when there was no car running during the wartime and other thing. Even those who gone there now, you can see that distance. People go, they live in Medina, they leave from Medina, they go Bukulu and come back in the town.
I think that a lot of these boundaries and a lot of these towns were reconstituted. That happens a lot.
All right. Okay.
That's
possible.
Because these are clearly, the distance is not adding up. And so what I want everyone to keep remembering, our people, when there's devastation, they pack up and they migrate. That's what happens to us. Somebody come and burn your town, you migrate, you settle, you rebuild.
Yes.
That is exactly what happened to Musadu. Musadu is not any longer where it was. So you have to pick up and you rebuild. And a lot of times, not a lot of times, occasionally they'll rename the town after the place that was destroyed.
Yes.
So we cannot use modern geography, because the way they used to name towns, there were different ways they named towns. So we can't necessarily use modern geography in that way.
Okay.
And also if we use modern geography, we're going to confuse the past. It's the same thing. I mean, it happens with a lot of things, or towns, or even countries are named after empires that they're not even connected to. Right? So you've got modern Ghana, which is not ethnically, historically necessarily connected to ancient Ghana. Right? So people get confused with that as well. Or when we talk about Western Sudan, it has absolutely nothing to do with the modern country of Sudan. This is something that you have to understand the context of these things. So in West Africa, it's very common for when a place is destroyed for the survivors to go and reestablish. One thing that has remained constant, the location of Dukuly. There's certain places that have remained constant. And so we have to know what those places are. Also, the modern settlements, or the Western settlements, I should say, not modern. The Western settlements, their locations were basically etched in stone. And even if you burn Millsburg, they're going to say this is where Millsburg was, because the culture, how they name places is different. So let's move on. Any questions before we go?
I didn't get that part. You said the first part. You said we should not use modern geography to discuss the past, the ancient time. Why is it applicable to Bambuta and Menina, but it's not applicable to Marisburg and Clay Ashland? These are still existing in the same places now.
Because many places were destroyed by war. Many of these places, Anderson Pass, were destroyed by war. You've got rolling wars. I don't know for certain, and I'm not going to say that I know for certain, that there's not, 3 or 4 other places that were called Medina. But what I do know is that Medina itself is named after, that is more of a name that you find all over West Africa for town. And it's because of you've got Mecca and Medina. People just name the settlement Medina. It's like a holy city. So did Medina have another name besides Medina? When they were there, was it called something else before it was taken over by the conquerors and named Medina?
I see where your question coming from. I think what we're saying is that there are particular towns name. Those towns, the name reflect who are there. For example, doesn't mean who are there. Yeah.
Yes.
The Great people, Manina is not part of that. For example, you go to Bokassa, Bokassa occupied by the Buzi people, the Doma Buzis, right? But Bokesa.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was conquered, and so as long as the name is there, you know that name was the one existing before. That's the
Yeah.
same way with Medina. So in our whole region, Vonzong all the way to Bopolu, there are two important Medinas there. One is Swen area, they call it Swen Medina, and one in Bopolu, call it Bopolu Medina. And they were there for particular purpose and still serving their purposes today, up to now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So where is Swim Medina?
The Swan Medina is right next to, or it's not far from of Vonzon. By car, when the road is nice, it's just about 2 hours drive.
So how do you know that this is not the Swim Medina?
It's not a Swan Medina because Bambuta was mentioned before Medina on the
It
map.
doesn't say Bambuta. It says, well, okay, bamboo, and you're saying it's Bambuta, meaning that the pellets are calling it Bambuta.
Yeah.
But how do you know there was not more than one bamboo?
No, we don't know. We don't know there's not more than one Bambuta because of the way the map is drawn. Because it was the way the map is drawn. That particular region, that's what it is. Mamuta.
So you see where they have Wita? You see where they have Wita? Anyway, let's continue with the whole thing. So they go down to Basestown. He leaves Basestown to head to Boku. After King Besa has basically harassed him. So he says, Menina, on the 13th of March, I want to point this out. He says on Saturday, the 13th of March, he left Menina, and after traveling 40 miles westward, so he's saying that the distance between Menina and Basestown is 40 miles. So they reached Basestown at 6:00 p.m. He gives the coordinates of Basestown: latitude 7 degrees, 3 feet 19, and it says in western portion of Gola country. So this is the western portion of the Gola country, and so this is in Vai-Gola. This is clearly Vai-Gola territory. So the distance between Menina and Basestown is very important. So that is a 40-mile distance. So now the distance between Bambu and Menina is about half of that. So that's roughly 20 miles between those two places.
Exactly.
Okay.
So from this explanation, you just raised one more question. You know how from the beginning we thought, I thought from the explanation that Basic Town was in Cape Mount, right?
It's in modern Cape Mount.
Modern Cape Mount. Can it be that it's in modern Bombay County, not Cape Mount?
No, because of the location of Robertsport. It's west of Robertsport.
That could just be indication on the map, because 40 miles from Bopolu, or 40 miles from Manina, wherever that is located now, to go all the way to the west, you'll still be in modern day Bombay County.
If you look at the other map, that's why I had the missionary map that was drawn about 20 years after. Basestown is still in the same location, was still in the same location at that time. That's why I showed the two maps.
Okay.
Right, and I don't want us to spend too much time on the geography.
Yeah, I mean, we can go back and look at that. I think that the issue here is we have to just erase temporarily, suspend what you know, and listen to Anderson's expedition, look at the locations with an open mind, then you can go back. Otherwise, we're not really learning, we're just trying to prove what we already know to be true. And that's not how we should approach history. We have to look at it first, see the entire picture, and then compare it to the existing knowledge. But if we spend our entire time looking at research, trying to prove what we already know, we won't have the same capacity to assess new information. So we have to be very careful with that. So Dennis, if you can go back, please, 2 slides. So that red arrow Go back down one slide. You've gone too far. Where you have the red arrow. One more. Yes, right there. So this is the missionary map. That red arrow is pointing to Besa. And if you look down, that is Robertsport, and you can look at it in your own presentation as well. So it's the same. You're getting into British territory at the other side of that river. That's the Mono River on the left. This is definitely not Boni.
Okay. It's just a question. That's all.
And 40 miles is actually, it takes us, in modern developed countries where you have highways, 40 miles seems like a short distance, but it's not. It really isn't.
Oh.
It's a very long distance. 40 miles is not a short, stretch of land. So basically, this man is in Besa's town. He's complaining about Besa, how filthy his town is, how how he's a treacherous human being. And this is the funniest part of the whole thing. I'm going to tell a little. So King Besa is somebody's ancestor. So there's many people alive in Liberia today that are descendants of King Besa. And this is what Anderson says about this ancestor. He says, I was informed that he had purchased a dispensation from the rigid observations of that creed from some of the Madingo priests. So this is a Viking that purchased a dispensation from the Madingo priests, telling them, hey, I'm Muslim, but I'm going to give you this money so you can absolve me of my current sins and any sins I'm going to have in the future, any bad or wickedness I'm going to do in the future. So, this is clearly not, based on the Holy Book. He was just a very interesting person. So he played, according to Anderson, what he was told by others is that, he's paid this large sum of money and it basically gave him a license to do evil. and so he was not a good guy, and apparently he was absolved of all of his evil because he had paid some large sum of money to some priests. So Kefo, he ended up meeting Kefo, the original guide, at Besa's town. So Kefo goes ahead to Besa's town. They carry him up. He's now convinced Besa to also obstruct Anderson. So I'm not going to get into all the details. I do want you all to read this book, but it's very, very interesting. So he didn't want them to pass through his country. He started trying to extort resources from them. He was just a horrible, horrible host because he had this license to do evil things. So he complains about how Besa had tricked them, and the remaining Congos who were with him. There were still some Congos and a couple of crewmen who did not abandon, and it were among the other carriers. And they had started complaining and crying that they didn't want to go to Bobru, they wanted to go home. King Besa, they had a tussle. King Besa started threatening to enslave them, and now they're terrified. They think they're going to be put into slavery. I mean, the stories go on and on. But at the end of the day, after spending essentially months at Besa's town, he then heads towards Bopro. So we're seeing this map. Are we looking at the map? Okay. No, we should be looking at the map of, which one are you on?
From Bopolo down to Territorial.
No, we've gone too far. Please go back. So because we're still at Besa's town. So now he's going to Bopolo. This is important because King Momoru is one of the most significant kings in this period. And he was the king of Bopuru. He was extremely powerful. This man had a trade network that spanned all the way to the Sahara and all the way to modern day Senegambia area. And he had porters and carriers. And I mean, this was a powerful, powerful man, King Momoru. He supplied the Liberian government, the Liberian people on the coast with so much resource. Part of the reason they were able to survive, in spite of a lot of sabotage by Europeans, was because of the wealth of King Momoru and his ability, or not even his ability, to bring not only food, but other luxury items such as very warm country cloth, lots of goods from the interior. And they would purchase those things from King Momoru and then be able to then trade and build their wealth. So this was not just some guy sitting in a town like King Besa being wicked. He was not a foolish king. One of the important things that Anderson does is he describes the character of these people. He didn't like Besa because Besa basically held him hostage. And so people had the worst things to say. But King Momoru was classic African nobility. Very, very intelligent. A man of integrity and fairness, even though he was extremely brutal and had slaves. But again, the time period, that was normal. When we talk about our indigenous kings, this should be a person that every school child learns about in Liberia. King Momoru of Bopuru. This is an actual person who existed that we've documented. And it astonishes me that if you ask Liberian people, who were your 19th century meaning 1800s, who were your 19th century rulers, this name should be one of the top 5 that comes up. Because he was absolutely one of the most powerful people at that time in that region. So I just wanted to emphasize that before we talk about Bopuru.
Yeah.
So he stayed there from March until May. And it was on the 28th of May that Kefa finally, Momoru said, let the people come. And that's when they started traveling. So I want to believe that there were a lot of things done before these guys headed to Bopuru. And this is me speculating. This is not from the book. So I do want to separate my speculation from what I actually have in the text. But because Momoru was so intelligent, I want to believe when they told King Momoru they were coming, and the messengers had already gotten these messages to him, I think Besa was holding him hostage because eventually he got to go to Bopuru. So Anderson thinks he was able to go to Bopuru because of his own strength. I don't know if I completely accept that. I think if they wanted to stop him from going, they would have stopped him from going altogether. He couldn't overpower them, in his own words. It was not through persuasion. All of a sudden, Besa just says, okay, y'all go to Bopuru. And I think that order came from Bopuru itself. I think it as this King Momoru said, let the guys come. Whatever it is that they were trying to avoid him seeing, they had probably already moved from his path.
Yeah. So Carl, let me deviate a little bit, because as we go northwards, I'm thinking about southeast, right? I don't see these rulers that we hear of, King Momoru and all these people. You don't really have that when you go to the Crew country. If I
because you guys are culturally communists. Right. Cultural communists. So Ivory Coast and in southeastern Liberia, what I learned early on in my education in history of West Africa, antiquity 1800. That's how old I am, because that was the textbook that we used. But so what I was taught at the University of Minnesota, which has been validated throughout my studies, is that in those days, they were not politically correct. They would call them stateless societies. I think there's a more politically correct term now, because it's not that they're stateless. It's that people are autonomous, living in autonomous clans.
They're liberal.
Yes, this is a good word. They're living in autonomous clan-based societies. So I would not call that being stateless. I would say they don't have a strong central authority that oppresses and taxes them. That is the distinction, the cultural distinction. So the people in the Southeast are used to more of an egalitarian, community-based, even when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to decision-making, everybody, that is wise or of a certain age gets to sit at the table and make decisions collectively. The headmen of the various clans, when it's a regional issue, they can all get together and debate. That is the birth of democracy. That tradition is older than Greece, than ancient Greece. It is this type of governance that gave birth to what Greeks and subsequent civilizations refer to as democracy. Don't let anyone tell you that we didn't give anything to the world. So what they're calling stateless is basically a society where you have equality, you have human rights, and you essentially have suffrage. People have a right to participate in the decisions that control their destiny. That is what Western scholars once referred to as being stateless. It doesn't mean there's no state, but because it's Africa, they must use this kind of derogatory language. But if you really study it, it's not statelessness. It is where the people are empowered.
Now, Prof, is it the same? Was that the same situation for the case of the Igbos in Nigeria?
Yes. Many societies in West Africa, pre-Islam, this is how people were free. This is how people were liberated. And the reason I say pre-Islam is because along with Islam came Arab culture. The two things are married. So many of the traditions that come from Arabia are introduced to Africa through religion. The same way Western European culture is introduced to Africa through Christianity. So if you want to know how we were organized before the influence of our conquerors, that is what it was. So King Momoru, being a Muslim, probably for generations, I don't know, would have been more of a patriarchal male, that whole thing is very foreign. We talk about Mandingo people before Islam being matrilineal. Some remnants of the matrilineal society still exist in many of the different Mendi societies, including Lama, Vai, Mano, Pele. Many of us have still maintained some matrilineal aspects of our culture. For Mano people, for example, it is the mother that determines the birth order of the child, not the father. That is a matrilineal characteristic. The same thing with the Kisi. Excuse me 1 second, I gotta take care of my daughter.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you are just joining us, this is Focus on Liberia, and we are on the Liberian History channel. Today, we are talking about the life of Benjamin J.K. Anderson and his trip to Musadu, his journey to Musadu. This is part 2. Last week, we introduced it, and we saw what happened. Today, we are going a little more in detail on Comrade Benjamin J.K. Anderson. I like to call him like that because I feel very close to him. This is my guy. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we will do more of this.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Tanneh-Chewlae.
All right, welcome back to Focus on Liberia and welcome to the Liberia History Channel. Let's go back to Benjamin J.K. Anderson and see where he's at this point.
So now Anderson is going to Bopuru. We talked in depth the last two shows. I'm going to encourage everyone to go back and watch the last two shows because we did talk in depth about his experience in Bopuru, going to the grave of Boatswain. We talked about the slave rebellion at Bopuru and how basically what he described didn't sound like traditional indentured servitude. It sounded much like chattel slavery, where the human beings were property and were not free to go or to be liberated in their lives at all. So they had to make a fight, a physical, violent attempt to free themselves, and then they were all executed. We talked about all of these things that happened in Bopuru and how the slaves of King Momoru and his clan outnumbered them tremendously. So you have a king who's extremely powerful, and the majority of the towns in the area are occupied by enslaved people. And these people are held in check, and these people are porters. These people are farm laborers. These people are used to do physical labor. And so this was some of the things that he unearthed as he got to Bopuru. That may have been one of the things that they did not want him to see, was that, basically chattel slavery was alive and well, and this very powerful and wealthy king, regional king, when I say regional, I'm talking about all over West Africa. He was an extremely powerful trader, businessman, and ruler. But he was so powerful that, in fact, that entire region was subjugated by King Momoru or his clan. So that is what he actually saw when he went to Bopuru. And he started to go to, he moved, so we can go to the next slide. I wanted to show an actual photograph of a man from Bopuru.
And this Bopuru is in modern day Bapolo.
Yes,
County.
and the city of Bopuru, yes.
You see, I don't care how you want to go away from people using modern day term. Sometimes using that, they bring it into context. But yeah.
So some significant places like Bopuru that were not destroyed still remain. And because Anderson went there, and before, you also had missionaries that went there, those names remain. Whenever you see stop using the word, the Western people go in and name a place, typically those names remain in the record. Typically. Our traditional names are what we are, unfortunately, have lost many of, even at the locations of our traditional towns. As we said earlier, you go in the rainforest, there's no town around there for some kind of 20 miles, but there's an old remnant of a town in the middle of the bushes. You see this in Lofa, you see this in Grand Cru, you see this in Nimba, you see this everywhere. Town is gone. But you have remnants of it. You know it was there because you see banana growing in the bush or planting, or you see, plum tree or something that resembles, somebody was either farming here or there was a town. I personally have seen charred remains of a town, old clay town, and you can even see some places in Nimba and Lofa where there were walls around the town that have been burnt. You can even see the remnants, and forest has grown over it. Many people who hunt in Bapulu and Lofa and Nimba will testify to this, because the hunters go places where there's no towns, and they end up always seeing these ruins as well. So this photograph is of a Bopuru man. That's how he's described. It was published in 1905, and he went to Monrovia on a state visit. So he was there to see the powers of the state. and they did not name him in the photograph, but it was published in 1905, and they simply, unfortunately, referred to him as a Bopuru. This was 37 years after Anderson first went to Bopuru. So now you have people from Bopuru coming to Monrovia to discuss with government, and now recognizing the Monrovia people as their authority, as their centralized authority. This did not happen in the 1800s. So this is probably the first person from Bopuru to acknowledge the Liberian government as the authority of the land, the ultimate authority. So King Momoru was likely the last sovereign of that area before the government annexed it. So being in the territory and annexation are two different things. Being within the territory just means this is the territory, but they had no control. Annexation means they're now having some control. This really begins in the early 1900s.
And we must
so this man is not here to trade anymore as a person from a foreign country within the territory. This man is now here to interact with government as part of the country. And this is beginning around 1905 going forward.
I don't know whose grandfather is this or ancestor.
I was joking around. I told the people this is a person that be called Salpo, so everybody got mad.
No.
But this was, you know, I don't know this man's ethnicity. You know, he could have been Mandingo, he could have been Vai, he could have been both. Ethnicity is very fluid in West Africa. I don't know what he considered himself to be, but one thing I did notice, his hair was very curly. Our people in this region, because of our interaction with Fulani people, many people at that time had that curly Fulani hair. And, you know, you hear descriptions, but let's move on.
Right. I wanted to say the guy is a handsome guy from Bopuru.
And he seems to be tall, right? Very tall.
Very tall.
I'm not sure, but it looks like he would be a tall person.
And look at the print he has on. I mean, the gown there is just magnificent.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. And I think Garrison was president at this time in 1905. I want to believe. So from Bopuru, we are going to Tanneh-Chewlae.
Yeah, but then before the prompt speak, you know, you posted link to the show Prof. Kao was referring to, where she talked about what happened in Bopulu, the slave revolution or whatever that happened. So for those who want to go and visit that former show, please, that's the link that was posted by Dennis.
No, that's not the link. That's the book. Someone was asking for the book.
Okay. So is it possible?
Okay, that's the link to the book. Okay.
Okay. Can we get our link again to put up there so everyone can refer to that last show?
Yeah, we'll do that after the show before they get distracted.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. So in 1905, it would have been Barclay that this man went to go see. When Arthur Barclay took over. So this is the point where you've got Arthur Barclay. I think he became president in 1904. So by 1905, Barclay would have been the person that this unnamed nobleman from Bopuru would have gone to go meet.
And again, if we studied Barclay, you know, things started to kind of shift. You know, most Liberians remember him that he did a fairly good job.
Mm-hmm.
Carl would not agree. Carl like E.J. Roy and one other guy.
No, Barclay also is one of my favorites.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on.
All right. There's very few Liberian presidents that I don't, because I always understand their existence within the context of history. What was happening? You can't judge them by today's standards at all. You're talking about a time when human beings were just coming out of shackles. So even in Africa as well. So he goes to Dukuly or Territorial or however you want to call it. Mohammed is my linguistic expert. How would you pronounce this?
Totokole still existing, and it's still pronounced the same way. Totokole. Totokole
Okay.
still existing.
Totokole. So he goes to Totokole from Bokuru. I didn't spend a lot of time on Bokuru just because I've done so on past shows. So he goes to Totokole, and so the wall of obstruction has now basically ended, and he is describing all kinds of incredible things as he passes through this country. He's talking about agriculture. He's talking about rice being grown, cotton fields, and he's talking about massive towns where everyone is devoted to weaving country cloth. So you've got craftsman towns where they're producing masses of country cloth with various colors and designs. You've got another group of people making dyes, which is the ink that they're going to use to mark the fabric. And he's describing all of this economic activity and this dense population of people. Whenever you have a dense population, it means there's prosperity and children are surviving. Even though majority of the population, he's saying, is enslaved, meaning that they're subjects of this king. They don't have real liberty. However, they are living and they're surviving and they're eating well because they're having children who are surviving. They have a bustling economy. And it's extremely important to note that, because I think the misconception of our past is that we were just running around without clothes, waiting for someone to come and give us a country and an economy. And here we were engaged in trade networks that span the entire western region of Africa and even across the Sahara. So fabric, the cotton, I want you to think about this, Dennis and Mohammed. The cotton that was used to weave the fabric was farmed in the Liberian territory. The machines that were used to weave the cotton, you know how they slide it and bring it back and slide it? The dye that was used to color the fabric and create patterns, the thread, everything was produced from the state of agriculture to the final production. The manufacturing was done in this region. I want you guys to understand how important that is, because we don't do this any longer on a mass scale like we used to. Country cloth is something that we fix, and it's like some artisanal thing that is very, hard to come by. Here we're talking about a massive region where we're producing textiles of different colors, different consistencies, and we're producing them from cotton seeds being planted in the ground all the way to the final product. We are growing rice, which had been done for hundreds, potentially over 1,500 years in this region.
Right, and exporting the rice to America.
Yes, because they were bringing rice to the coast. Right. They were feeding the people at Monrovia and providing them with other economic, activity, helping to increase their wealth in the city as well. They were trade partners. These people had a bustling economy, which was the remnant of the last empire. You're at the tail end of the greatness of West Africa. What Anderson is witnessing is the dying of a giant, the last days of a giant, the slow and painful last days of a dying giant that gave the world everything.
What has changed?
What do you mean by that question?
Why we don't do that now?
We were conquered. That's what happens when people are conquered. Everything is lost. And the other thing conquerors do is they distort your history. The conquerors erase, they tell you you didn't do anything, you were nobody, we saved you. We gave you God. We gave you, your humanity. You were not human being before we conquered you. Is the story the conquerors tell all over the world when they conquer people. It's not just in Africa that they do that.
Sad.
So I don't know where we are, Dennis. I can't see that.
Right.
Oh, is he at Zozo yet? No, where is he? Read the slide for me, Dennis. I apologize, I can't see it.
Right.
Yes,
So from Territorial now, between there we have Salayo, we have Nesi Pia, and then the one that is Sako here is Zeleki, 1911.
Yes. So he's now in the town of Zeleki. Let me go ahead and pull this up so I can see it. So Zeleki is before he gets to Zozo, and this is where he's describing most of this agricultural. He calls it the cane and plantain plantations. So in Zeleki, they're growing sugar cane. They have plantain and bananas. And when I say this, I'm not talking about little small farms. I'm talking about massive agriculture projects. When Anderson describes this, he stands on the hill, and as far as he can see, that's all he sees.
Wow. The
only farms we have like that, for the most part in Liberia, are industrial farms owned by foreigners, like for extractive reasons, right? At this time, you're talking about in the 1800s. He stands on the hill and he looks, and all he sees is agriculture. And every human being is employed and busy and doing something productive, creating wealth, not for themselves, unfortunately, but creating wealth for these kings. So you're not talking about small families, scratch and burn farms where, what we do now for survival. We're talking about well-structured, well-organized, massive plantations. Another one of these massive plantations that's not mentioned here was Baiting Rice Station, one of the largest rice farms in the world at the time was the Baiting Rice Station in modern-day Nimba. One of the largest rice plantations in the world at the time. Now it's just a forested swamp. Everything was overgrown. We're going to get into, in future episodes, what happens to our agriculture projects, and we'll be very specific, but this is the last days. And let me tell you all something. If Anderson had not gone here and witnessed these things, what of our oral tradition has passed this down? What of our oral tradition talks about King Momoru? What of our oral traditions talks about these massive plantations?
We'll dismiss it.
Now I can see the problem with the oral tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they pick and choose.
It's not about picking and choosing. It's about, I want to say this.
Accurate.
We have in West Africa a tradition of griots. That tradition of griots carries the oral tradition almost impeccably. They are almost supernatural. They are trained from very young to recite and chant the history, the names through song. They don't deviate from that. But they're not able to tell you anything beyond what is passed down. In Liberia and this part of what is now Guinea, we don't have those griot cultures intact, and this is very unfortunate. So Mali, you go to certain parts of Guinea, Senegal, they know They can name these kings going all the way back with accuracy. Because our oral tradition is not as strong, it's in fact probably some of the weakest oral tradition in Africa. A lot of information is just invented, unfortunately, or pieced together and confused. The important things that if we had true griots in this region that we would know, we would definitely know King Mumuru's name. We wouldn't have to hear it from Anderson. We would know King Besa's name. We wouldn't have to know it hear it from Anderson. Even you going back to the 1800s and the kings that they're naming, those names don't exist in the oral tradition any longer. Those things have been lost. These massive agricultural plantations, I mean, Baiting Rice Station, you hear about it. And then I'm like, how much of this is actual oral history and how much of it is just things people read and are passing on? Some of that gets confused too. But here you have someone documenting, standing on a hill, standing in the highlands and looking off, and as far as you can see is agriculture.
And Carl, one thing that I've heard over and over is in our Liberian history or in our Liberian charter, we hear that or Sierra Leone or Nigeria, Ghana, these places are looking good today because they were colonized. Or how we wish or Liberia too were colonized so we can have, big cities and towns. I'm thinking that for some Liberians hearing this may say, okay, we're under people like King Mumuru and kind of working for their wealth, and we have these huge farms. Maybe some Liberians would prefer being under the rule of King Mumuru and others, so as to kind of feeling nostalgic about those days. Because
I don't know if anyone living in modern times would survive back then. I just don't even, when I study history, you have to look at the context. I don't want to live back then.
Right.
This period was not the pinnacle of West African civilization. What Anderson's witnessing is greatness, but this is at the tail end of the greatness.
Yeah.
This is the deterioration. I don't know. I can't talk today. The deterioration of greatness. This is where it's breaking down. This is where everything is deteriorating, and you're having wars and other things, constant battles. But even with all of that degeneration, you're still seeing things that are far greater than what you see today. Another thing that is extremely important to point out is that these cities had walls around them. These cities and towns were fortified with walls. We talk about the ruins at Yala. I don't know if everyone knows about that, but there's these old ruins from these, walls that have been, weathered. And they say, oh, this was, once Yala was this. They say all these things. The truth is, that's how all the cities and towns were structured. They had these massive clay walls around the cities. The last episode, we showed a picture of Mamadou. I said I wrongly misspoke. I called it Musadu. It was Mohammed that the picture was of. I apologize. With the elephants and the wall around the city and the guy on the horse. So that's Mohammed, which was just before Musadu. Mohammed, he sketched the wall, the fortified wall, the defense wall was beautiful. Right. So we don't do that anymore. We don't build like that. We don't have architecture like that any longer.
Okay. Well, thank you. We have time is really, really fast spent.
Mm-hmm.
In 13 minutes, we'll be hitting 2 hours.
Okay.
So it is time to wind it down. We have not taken calls. We have not taken comments.
All right. And, let's just click through really fast.
Yeah.
And then we'll stop. So the next slide. This is just to demonstrate a sketch of Mandingo King, and I put it in parentheses. This man looks very Fula to me.
Yeah.
His helper behind him looks very Fula to me. The hair, the facial structure, ethnicity is fluid. Ethnicity is fluid. Jalo, ethnicity is fluid. They used to just call everyone Madingo, and so I put it in parentheses. I mean, in brackets, because I wanted to demonstrate why I don't emphasize these kinds of things, because it is difficult for us to look at the world that way. We'll go to the next slide. We can just breeze through. So really quick, that's Zolu, the town of Zolu. Zolu no longer is there, I don't believe, which was near Zorzor. Zorzor is still existing, because in the late 1800s, the reason the name of Zorzor never changed is because the Lutherans went there shortly after Anderson's second trip. They went up to Zorzor and established a mission, and they etched that name in stone. The next slide. And Zorzor, he also talked about this huge market where people were coming from all over to trade. Zorzor was a huge trading place. Next slide, please. So Chief Fumba, you see the of Wizu and Zorzor? You see that?
That's the next slide, Dennis. Yeah.
Okay. So this is a picture that was taken around 1930. I just wanted to show an example of the people of Zorzor. This is 1930, so somebody's grandfather. So we're talking about, 1930. Anderson was there in 1868. So like 52 years. The next slide, Balata, where he saw the people smelting iron, reverse engineering weapons, using the irons to make shackles, using the irons to make weapons, using the irons to do all kinds of things. But Balata, not Batala, but Balata in what is now Lofa. Balata, Loma, what we consider Loma settlement, smelting iron. Next slide. This is 1906, a sketch. This man looks a lot like the guy in the 1905, not resemble as in that they're the same person, but phenotypically, they look similar. This man in this book is described as a Madingo by Sir Harry Anderson. You can see this, again, to demonstrate that the ethnicity in the area is fluid. Language and culture, the fluidity of language and culture cannot be overemphasized. The next slide, he goes to the Yucca Hills. This is what they call Vuca or Yucca. These hills are what separated the Loma from the Madingo at that time. And so beyond those hills is where there were Madingo towns, and on the other side of the hill were the what they called at the time Boozy towns. Next slide, and this is not really a picture of Anderson arriving at Musadu, but I just used it to demonstrate. I thought it was cool, but that's how I imagine Anderson would have looked arriving at Musadu with these Congo and crew and Pele. He eventually picked up some Pele people in Vanswa and his carriers, and he would have arrived, and these men would have been draped in a lot of fabric because they manufactured it. They were fabric makers, so that would have probably been how it looked. Next slide. And this is Mohammadu. This is where that picture was actually sketched with the walled city. Next slide. And this is the last slide. It's very small. So this was to demonstrate what Mohammed and I have been discussing and slowing down the presentation, which was, you see all these towns? With the exception of the 3 that I circled, their names were different when Anderson went there. In some cases, their locations were different. And in fact, many of the slave towns that he was describing as passing have collapsed. And when we talk about Samori Toure, we're going to explain what happened, how it happened. there was something coming that Anderson was not aware of in 1868. When he went back in 1874, he was at the very beginning of a catastrophic event. And there were a lot of wars and a lot of death. But that will explain to you why many of these towns are buried by the rainforest today and why these newer towns sprung up in the early 1900s. But most of these towns that you're seeing were erected, re-erected, both on the Guinea and the Liberia side after the devastation of the fall of Tanneh-Chewlae.
And Cole, I can recognize two towns at the bottom there, Sukrumu and Paye.
Yeah.
They are still in Lofa there around the Pele people area.
Yes. I was talking about towns that he actually went to, but that's true.
But Bokesa, he went to Bokesa and Bokesa stayed there.
Where's Bokesa? Oh, up there. I was looking more at the road up okay, so you see how the St. Paul River goes?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the road to Musadu. And so
yeah.
So that's the direction he's going. Everything in the perimeter, I wasn't even focused on. I was looking at towns that he mentioned.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
So yeah, of course. I mean, there's some places that are still going to be in the current locations. And also, I want to tell you that he didn't mention these towns and he didn't map them. It doesn't mean that they weren't there. He just didn't mention them. So this is Google Earth 2022, that map that we're looking at. I just want to clarify that.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
All right. No, thank you so much. We are way out of time, so we won't have time for questions or call. And we can.
Oh, I'm sorry, I messed up.
No, it's not you. We can just wrap it up because history is these things happened years ago.
If someone has a quick question, just let one person ask question with this. I feel bad. I talk too much.
Yeah. No, we can always read.
This is always the case for history discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We asked the question for them, you know.
Yeah, we did. You all asked a lot of questions. So there's not any particular question that's standing out that you think needs to be answered? I'm not on Facebook, so I can't see.
One person asked question from the beginning. I think you did answer. The person was saying, the person was just talking about Gatamba, whether he was a Gola king or not. But you did answer that. You said he was a Viking.
It's so ethnicity is fluid. I'm not going to say what his ethnicity is, but I know that his name is Vi.
Oh,
so just because your name is Vi, ethnicity is fluid. There's such a thing as a Vi Gola person. There's such a thing as a person having one parent from one place and another parent from another place. So it's not for me to say how someone identified themselves and it wasn't documented.
You know how Tanneh asked from the beginning that some of these things we know are orally to quote. You did mention the trade languages, the Vi and the Matingo. And in the oral history, and what we can see there now in that area, they also had the Bubulu Pele language, which is a combination of Gola, Matingo, and Vi. And that's one we still speak now.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Mohammed, we gotta leave it there so that we can wrap this up. I don't want us to go beyond 20.
So thank you, Dennis. Next week we're gonna do Tanneh-Chewlae and Musadu Empire.
Wow.
Thank you so much. Teddy Yankunse, you had question. Teddy, please go on the show and post your questions. We'll have time. We're going to respond to it. We got to close it here at 2 o'clock. So call your comments and then we can draw down the curtains. Call.
So thank you for watching. I'm not going to say a whole lot. If there's anything you learned from this episode, I want you to know that this was not our heyday, but what Anderson was able to capture was the deterioration. So what was before this time period was even greater than what he saw. That's very important. Next week, we are going to focus on the ending. We're going to tie all of this to what occurred in his 1874 journey and the Musadu Empire Tanneh-Chewlae created, and what happened after the fall, and where many of our people came from. Instead of focusing on this city of Musadu that was destroyed, it was an entire empire of Tanneh-Chewlae that was actually destroyed, that people fled from. So we're going to correct not correct, but interject and enhance that aspect of the oral tradition with written record.
On that note, we say thank you for joining. We are all Liberians. It's the song that takes us home.
All right, thank you so much.
God bless.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our home. Liberian people. Liberia.